I think maybe we should just make a channel dedicated entirely to Gen Z in crisis. We have another viral video of a young person talking about how they cannot afford to live this way. And there's so much to break down in this. Now, there's certainly some people who are blaming this young woman and blaming many for voting for Joe Biden and voting Democrat over and over again. I certainly sympathize with that sentiment, and I would strongly encourage many young people to vote for Donald Trump and Republicans. Not that he's perfect, not that he's great. It's just simply the Democrat plan with a mass influx of criminal aliens who are being given government benefits, tax dollars that you were actually supposed to be inheriting. In terms of infrastructure and what this nation has to offer its young people, it's being given away. Inflation, war, conflict, crisis, none of it will improve your circumstances. And while Donald Trump certainly is not the most perfect guy, certainly a deeply flawed character, well, money talks. You vote for this guy, you're likely going to see the economy improve. And I think most people realize that now because during the Trump administration, economy actually was really great. Famously, Jim Cramer, who's basically wrong about everything all the time, said the best numbers of our lives. And it was true. Unemployment rates were low, but high enough to allow some flexibility in the job market. There's a lot to talk about in terms of culture as to why what we're seeing cannot be solved simply by elections at the same time. So the first thing I want to do is actually just play this clip so you can hear what this young woman has to say. I think it's very important, but then we're going to break down the problems that we're facing today. And I want to give some advice to young people like this young lady. So if you know anybody who's dealing with this stuff, consider sharing this with them. And we'll talk about ways to improve your position.
This is the first month I won't be able to afford rent. I'm not a rich person. I don't have a lot of stuff. I have basic household necessities, a couch, a bed, washer, a dryer. That's about it. A car. I don't have a lot of lavish things. I don't go on vacations and I don't spend a lot. Rent's increased from $1,300 to $1,800. The food prices are too high. I've cut back on eating because I literally cannot afford food. I've cut back on my favorite snacks, cat food, treats. I'm exhausted all the time from being overworked and underpaid. You don't catch a break when you grow up poor. I don't need much to be happy. I just want to be able to live comfortable. I just really need to catch a break right now. I'm trying so hard and I feel like I'm not doing enough. I don't have family. I don't have anything to fall back on.
She says, I don't have family. I don't have anything to fall back on. I'm going to have to address the most important element of this. Never in human history did young women go off and live on their own successfully. I will say this again. Never in human history. Now, for men, I would argue it's comparably true, but I think the issue is, well, in terms of societal structure and gender norms, men were always typically expendable. So a man that ended up living off on his own, like probably, possible, but we would not call that good circumstances. Typically for younger women, their families would take care of them, and then they would get married to into a strong family. Not always, not completely. Certainly there are historical moments where raiders and Vikings captured and these women. My point is simply this. In generally speaking, the way human civilization has worked is that everyone lived together all the time. When you would get your first house, it's typically because you were starting a family. You were getting married and have kids, and now you needed the space for a family. But if you weren't married, you were probably a teenager and living at home. The issue that we're seeing right now, a lot of this has a lot to do with economic policy that's failing. It has a lot to do with women in the workplace, the expansion of the job labor pool without a comparable expansion of labor opportunities. At the same time, the flooding of criminal aliens, which suppress job opportunities. There's so much to break down here. The first thing I'll say is these problems are solvable today. And it starts with cutting illegal immigration. The jobs that are available would pay better if there were less people competing at the lower skill levels. When the Democrats allow, like Joe Biden, these criminal aliens to come in and prop them up and support them, you end up with people competing for the same work. This means that there is a suppression of pay rates. There's no way to stop that. It's just a fact. If there is one job and 100 people and they're fighting over it, the cost of that job goes dramatically down because everyone's competing to get the cheaper job. And it's tough. You can't just pay more because then where does that money come from when you have tons of hungry people aren't buying anything? So it's complicated. What I would say for this young woman is that first and foremost, the idea that you can live in your apartment by yourself is ridiculous. That's never been the case. Even when, it's this weird thing that emerged. I don't know when. This idea that a single human, single, not non-coupled, could afford their own place. It's insane. It's an insane luxury to have your own apartment. That being said, I believe this woman should be able to own her own home, have a family, and subsist off of a single income. What that means is a significant other and a shared workload where there's a work-life balance between the two individuals. That's how things used to be. Ma'am, with all due respect, have you stopped to consider why it is you believe you can have your own place to live by yourself and work on a single income and maintain all of this stuff? If we were to go back in time, you take a look at when single-family households were able to sustain a full house and a car and vacation and all that stuff, you had someone raising a family. You did not have women competing in the labor market. That meant that if you wanted the best talent for work, it was typically going to be a guy, and he was going to say, I have a family, need more money. Good luck. Something changed. When feminism erupts, and it's throughout 100 years, but when we get to the point where women are now competing in the labor market and they're told you have to get jobs, you create a circumstance I believe that many women do not like. Guys thrive on competition and object-oriented pursuits. Clearly, she does not. And I'm not saying all women, and that's the problem. A system that tells a woman she can't pursue these things is a bad system. A system that forces women to do it is also a bad system. But this is where we are, the worst of both worlds, and I don't necessarily know what the solution is. But I think it's important to track the historical context of you've never been able to do things like this. It was the utmost wealth. This young woman is the apex of global human wealth throughout history. The fact that she was even able to sustain her own place to live with a pet and a car is a testament to the successes of the United States. But the golden age is over, my friends. We're going to be going back to the way things used to be. A child was born and a family had 9 kids and they all lived together in the same house. And when you were getting married, this is how it used to be. A guy would say, oh, this is a beautiful woman. I want to marry her and have a family. Go to the father and say, can I have your permission to marry your daughter? He'd say, yes or no. And typically it's like, and I'm not saying every single circumstance was like this. There are certainly shotgun weddings and there was raids and there's rape. But in the United States, going back only a few hundred years, the general tradition is as follows. And so the funny thing is land was easier to come by. And they would just like build you a house somewhere. The family's going to come together. We're going to help build a house. And then you're going to have kids and have a family too. We're in a different age. Times have changed. Property is harder to come by. There are much more people. And if you want to live in a city, things are owned by someone else. I recommend moving somewhere else and living a much more humbler way of life. This idea that you can live in a city on a single income, it's not normal for the history of this planet. Now, I do think if this woman was stressed out and didn't want to worry about this, she has an option. Historically, what she could do is she could find a high-value man who generates a large sum of money, enough to sustain this house, and offer him something he would want in exchange. Now, typically, that would be a family and companionship and emotional satisfaction, all those things that come with a loving relationship. Maybe they don't want to have kids, and that's fine too. Perhaps she could find someone to pair bond with, and if she doesn't like working so hard, she could find a man who makes more than she does. Really, that's it. I think modern feminism has created this world that has resulted in this expectation that is going to leave a lot of women struggling. The reason why I was saying early on that, women never did these things, they never lived on their own like this, women didn't work. And you could argue is that women were considered property, whatever you want to say. You can say it was their rights were oppressed. Fine, believe whatever you want to believe. That's fine. But that was what it was. I'll put it this way. When I was growing up, I had been homeless several times. slept on park benches here and there, eventually got a car and slept in a car. And I actually didn't think it was that bad. But I'm a dude. I'm a guy. I could, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll do what I have to do. For a lot of reasons, I don't think women are comfortable in those kinds of circumstances. Notably, there was one story about an Antarctic researcher who complained of sexism in science because they did not have porta potties placed in the Antarctic region where she could go to the bathroom. Because men can relieve themselves very easily just by unzipping their pants. But women, not so much. She wrote this long article about how she tried using funnels and things like this. And my point is simply, men and women are very different. And women probably would not enjoy living in this kind of circumstance. That being said, when I was growing up, there was one reason why women were not homeless and men were. Why men are 5 times more likely to be homeless. Look, I got to be honest. This young woman right here, if she really wanted to, could find a 45-year-old millionaire guy who is going to take care of her and cover everything. That's the reality. This is what gender roles have typically always been. And if she's lucky, the guy's not even going to expect anything from her. If she's lucky, she could find a man who is well off, older, successful, owns a lot of property, and he's going to say, I would love to spend time with you, blah, blah, blah. And they form a relationship. Maybe she doesn't want that. That's fine. But that's the advantage that women have in these traditional gender norms that men do not. There are certainly men who can find sugar mamas. But when I was growing up, the women I knew who struggled always had a place to live. Always. Not every single one. I knew some women who I grew up with who turned out to be very homeless, and it's unfortunate, drug use and things like this. But for me, when I was like 19, yeah, I've got nowhere to go. And ain't nobody wants to let you stay there. Just absolutely not. That's the reality of it. And, I eventually have friends and they said, we've got space for you. We're going to charge you X amount. And I say, you got it, man. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Was cleaning up at a bar, played guitar in the subway. I said, I'm going to make money. I'm going to figure it out. And I got by. I did. As for the women that I knew, they would just say, I'm broke. I can't afford it. And they'd move in with their boyfriends on average. That's a reality. I think it's important to recognize what we're dealing with right now. Young people aren't forming relationships the same way. Things cost substantially more, but there are traditional gender role solutions to what this woman is experiencing. Not that I think she should have to, but I don't know how we get to this world where single female individual can afford to live entirely by herself forever. That is the epitome of luxury. These are the things that are going to result in a stunted generation. They're going to result in a lack of population growth. And then without population growth, the system breaks. Our entire system is predicated upon there will be more young people to do work than old people. And so what you get with Democrats is a mass influx of criminal aliens and non-citizens to try and supplement this. But the problem is it's unsustainable. Young people now are trying to live lives that we've never lived before. I don't know where this assumption comes from, but it is just not true. Maybe it's from watching TV and seeing Friends, and they have these big apartments and always some explanation as to how these people live this way. Some people argue she should have roommates. I think it's actually really simple. She should live with her parents. She should live with her parents and be saving money until she gets to the point in her career where she can do something. I will add, however, everyone has been stunted. And I can't really explain why. I think it has a lot to do with cultural decay and our economic system as it stands. I hear a lot from people. They say, there's never a right time to have a family. You can wait and wait and wait. It's never going to happen. You're either going to do it or you're not. I certainly know people who had kids in when they were teens and they've become successful. And I can say for me, because many people are like, how come you're not married with a family and you're 38? I thought about it. And I go back to, even when I was in my mid to late 20s. And I suppose growing up for me, you should be to a point historically where when you're 18, you have a trade and you're providing some skill to the community. This allows you to make money, and then you find a family and there's a dowry of some sort. No, I was homeless when I was a teenager. I was making $10.75 an hour and then eventually $11.75 an hour working at an airport. Barely was making any money. I couldn't even afford an apartment. It was impossible, quite literally impossible. And I had a union job. $11 an hour was not enough for me to afford the vehicle to get to work. And so eventually I was like, this is impossible. I'm done. I left. I quit. I've got to figure something else out. And then I should say I got lucky and found nonprofit work, which eventually got me to a salary range of around $35,000 a year. And then all of a sudden I was like, I got some money now to spend. And I still could not afford to get an apartment. This was in Los Angeles and Chicago. I could not afford to get an apartment on my own. There's no way I'm having a family crammed in a 3-bedroom with 4 people. And I could not afford the down payment or security deposit to get my own apartment. It just wasn't happening. So I suppose at a time when I'm in like my early 20s, when most people would expect your family to have already begun, I had no means to even do that. I can't speak for everybody else, but that was my story. I suppose it's fair to say around 28, 29 is when I certainly could have begun that process. And I think for me, what happens is growing up the way I did results in I have to make sure I've got the next 5, 10 years planned out income wise. Otherwise, I'll be back to living on, I don't want to sound like I was living on the streets. I was homeless, sleeping in a car periodically. And it was like, a couple times here and there. But you don't want to go back to that. You want to build a base you can sustain yourself on. I think that's what most people are looking for. Ultimately, my point is this. What we're looking at is going back in time, a person in their 20s could have had a general concept of stability in play. And for me and for many millennials and now many Gen Z, there is no place where that's a reality. And living at home with your family is not a reality either. It's just not the same anymore. I don't know necessarily what the solution is. What I can say outright is we've never lived this way. We need to get back to living with our families. That's what it used to be. It used to be like 3 generations living in one house or around each other. Now that's not the case. Now that's this idea that you're 18, you leave, you go off to college, you rack up tons of debt. Good luck. That ain't going to fly. The other thing I can say is in the short term. Not that I'm telling you have to like Donald Trump, but I'm telling you right now, you vote for Joe Biden and you make this worse. Their plan for economics is macro, not micro. They want to bring in a mass influx of criminal aliens, give them resources because they think it'll bolster the economy in general. But this will leave Gen Z and millennials behind. It will stunt their ability to actually develop, and it will long-term destroy this country. A vote for Donald Trump means the economy is going to get better for you, and your opportunities to live comfortably and have a family and succeed will become more likely. It was wild what was happening in 2019. People were saying that I'd run into so many people who said they never made more money in their lives. They were living comfortably. Their dreams were coming true. It's when we started building the Timcast IRL, the first studio. When I said, let's make a nightly show of some sort. I was doing only the morning show. And so it was the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, when I went to a furniture store to buy the initial setup for the first studio. And it was just like some table I bought and some chairs. And the saleswoman said, I spent $5,000. And she's like, this has been the best year of my life. I've never made more money. And then COVID happened. Sure. Well, people thought that voting against Donald Trump would help them. And now for the past 4 years, things have only gotten worse. Food costs are through the roof. I can't even believe it. Now, I'll stress this point too. This whole video was basically focused on just this young woman being like, why can't I live this way? And I'm like, yeah, young women never lived this way. Barely any young men live this way. But I will stress, there are many videos from fathers who have families and have trade jobs who are saying, I can't afford it anymore. We talked about one just last week where the guy said, $120 for 2 dinners, 2 nights of dinner, not even breakfast. It used to be $100 to get you groceries for the week for your family, for your wife and your kids. You got 2 kids. Certainly what we're seeing is a massive problem. I don't know how you solve for this. People can say work more, but that's not a solution. Sometimes there's just no work. I think the criminal alien crisis is going to add to this. People are going to be fighting over what little work there is to be done. And now you've got AI developments, which are going to start displacing more and more jobs. The left's response will be universal basic income. They're going to go to young women like this and say, how about we give you $500 a month, universal basic income? It'll help you cover that cost of rent. All that will do is make the problem worse. Universal basic income will create a general increase in costs. It won't solve the problem. They'll try to play the game of taxation as a means of pulling money from the market. Sure. But in the end, more people being given free money just means that prices will go up. There's no easy answer to this. It's a cultural problem, and I think it starts with border security. I can make 1,000,001 videos because there's about this because there's so many videos of young people saying it's a struggle. I guess the harsh reality is young people today were sold a bill of lies. You can't live this way. Good luck. Be an influencer. Get rich. If you're rich, maybe you can live this way. Here I am now. Things are going pretty well, but we have our struggles, certainly not related to this. I would say that I have zero risk of ever being homeless again. Not just because I own a lot of property and I'm wealthy, but because I've got a trailer that I own and I can park on a plot of land that's like a 1/4 acre and I can live in a trailer. It's great. I got an RV. It's really nice. The company's got one for mobile studio, but we got our own personal one. And so at a certain point, you can figure it out. But I suppose I should say most people don't want to live in the wilderness, in a rural area, in an RV. But solutions exist. And with the ability to work remotely, it is entirely possible to live in a van down by the river and actually have stuff. Not that people want that. But if you want to live in an apartment in the city, don't be surprised if they say you can't. We'll see how it goes. Best of luck to this young woman. I recommend getting married. Seriously, and then you'll have dual income. Next segment is coming up tonight. Let's say 6 p.m. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.